Tony, good to see you. Thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here, Sean. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So let's talk about let's start with what happened over the weekend. Give me your sense of how you think the meeting went.
So I like putting things in context. I've been saying that there were meetings in the past during the Cold War between us and the Russians that didn't immediately result in anything. It was not like, oh, this is a great event that came out of the negotiation. And I've been referencing Reykjavik in October of 86. In October 86, there was the famous meeting between President Reagan and Premier Gorbachev. And during that meeting, the Russians were fearful about the United States' new technology called SDI, Strategic Defense Initiative, Star Wars. Yeah, and so the Russians were adamant about getting rid of that. Would get rid of it, and Reagan didn't blink. And while nothing happened during that meeting, that is to say that by all appearances, it didn't go anywhere. The fact that Reagan didn't blink, he called Gorbachev's bluff. That one meeting resulted in the beginning of the end of the Cold War. From that came the INF Treaty, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Missiles, START 1, and also 89, the fall of the Berlin Wall. So simply because a meeting doesn't have visible results doesn't mean things didn't happen. And I do believe a lot of things happened. The one most public thing that came out of the meeting that President Trump has said, yeah, we're not going for a ceasefire. We want to end the whole thing. So if nothing else, that was significant right there, that was a stipulated policy position that now is going to be the position going forward.
It's interesting that you say that because I had the same impression. The thing that was weird to me is at the end of a meeting like this, normally both sides come out and debrief and talk. And in this case, they were supposed to have a press conference. They really didn't. And it made me wonder, did a lot happen in that room that you don't want to disclose because, they immediately announced the meeting with Zelensky that's happened today. But the point was, I kept thinking to myself, they didn't say, well, unfortunately, we couldn't get there, or this. It was almost like they agreed to not share the contents.
Yeah, I think it's correct because so much of what's going on goes beyond Ukraine. And this is something that, again, the American public seems to not understand. And Sean, I think you get it because you've been in the circles where these things matter. The Russians are the largest nuclear power on the planet. We have not been talking to those people for the past going almost 4 years. And I think neglecting that dialogue could have eventually resulted in what happened during the Cold War, which is near nuclear exchanges based on misunderstandings. You don't want to misunderstand, Sean, signals at that level, thinking that someone's about to launch on you. There's a great book by my dear past friend who died, but not past, but he died, Dr. Peter Pry. It's called War Scared 1983. And during this time, early part of the Reagan, we weren't talking to the Russians, we were talking past each other. And the Russians interpreted a major exercise called Able Archer. It was a command post. You know how these things work. You're a Navy guy. We were having a command post exercise. It wasn't even a real exercise. And yet the Russians thought, the Soviets thought, that we were using this exercise as a pretext to launch on them. So, we don't want to recreate similar miscommunications that could result in bad things happening. So if nothing else, Sean, this meeting now indicates we have both major nuclear superpowers talking to each other, which I'd like to believe is going to ratchet down any potential, which President Trump has commented on, any potential of a nuclear exchange or any sort of thing happening. It's very important to be talking. I think, if nothing else, that this meeting accomplished that.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this conversation, but if you're looking for a way to get to sleep tonight and stay asleep, I've got the answer for you. For over a year, I've been taking Beam's Dream Powder. It has made a world of difference. I fall asleep faster, I stay asleep, and I wake up ready to go. If you want to join me by taking one scoop every night before you get to bed, go to shopbeam.com/Spicer. Use code word Spicer at checkout for up to 40% off. Trust me, everything stems from a great night's sleep. Go to shopbeam.com/Spicer, code word Spicer. All right, back to the conversation. And don't fall asleep yet. There's a lot of people in the media that had their panties in a wad because there was a red carpet and planes flew over top. I don't know. I saw the B-2 flying above as a flex. Like it was, hey, guess what? That thing just dropped a bomb in Iran. And if you don't think, so that's, okay, I wanted to make sure you're the intelligence officer of the two of us. And I looked at that, not as a sign of respect. They were like, he got a flyover. I'm like, that wasn't like a flyover. That was a warning.
Yeah. No, and I think, ironically, there was F-35s escorting escorting Putin's plane in. There was a great deal of military flexing going on. And yeah, the B-2, between you and me, Sean, I would have had that thing come right over the top at 100 feet. Just saying. That's just me, though. But I would have just like, hey, look, you can see the bolts on it. So, but it was clearly meant to show. And by the way, I got this question several times. Do you think they told Putin about it? No. By Putin's response, he did not know.
Oh, no. He's looking up like, what the heck is that?
Exactly.
But were you at all, like, based on your, like, there was a lot of the media as I watched the Sunday shows, they were all like, Putin's a former KGB officer, like, this was showing him respect, and this was, like, what was your take about the optics of the meeting?
So I think two things can be true, and again, you know the man better than I do, but I think President Trump does respect Putin by the fact that Putin has been very clear. We may not agree with him. I'm not saying I'm pro-Russian. I'm saying that you have to understand that Putin has been successful. He's done some things that have benefited him. And within Russia, he's very popular. So you got to admit, I'm not a Putin fan. Putin, by all accounts, has murdered reporters in elevators in Moscow. Just saying. So, but he is their leader. He is the guy that the Russians have chosen to be that. So you gotta understand and accept that. Pretending otherwise, disrespecting him, got us nowhere, right? I mean, Biden did the disrespect thing, Sean. It didn't have any effect. Basically, it's like, yeah, we're going to just ignore you. So I think you had to have some level of understanding. Again, like the Cold War. Reagan called, remember this, Reagan called that famous speech at the Brandenburg Gate that they are the evil, today's evil. I don't remember the exact phrase, but he called the Soviets today the evil empire. And yet we treated the Russians with respect and détente to get them come to the table. Because if you continue to shout at each other and call each other names, you're not going to accomplish anything. So I think it was appropriate. I think there was a flex included. I think President Trump did show strength, but he also understood that basically poking the bear in the eye, it's not going to get you anywhere. You've got to have some level of a spot to start talking.
I played this clip at the top of the show. I think Martha Raddatz was the one who was basically like, by giving Putin a place in the U.S., by holding it in Alaska, that gave him, quote, everything he wanted. And
that's
Marco
insane.
Rubio.
That's literally insane.
Yeah, but Marco, I think, did a great job of explaining this, that, like, he is on the world stage. He is a nuclear power. Like, but what was the alternative, I guess?
Well, I think by all accounts, they were trying, once President Trump and Putin agreed to meet, they had to pick a spot. They talked about Turkey. Well, Turkey would have probably been difficult because of the ICC ruling, and Turkey's part of the ICC thing.
Just so that viewers and listeners understand that's the international court, and because he's a convicted war criminal, they would have to have arrested him, right?
Right, exactly. So Turkey was out. They talked about the UAE, Dubai, and other Middle Eastern countries. Security wouldn't have been sufficient within the time frame that was required. So I think as a middle ground, which I think is kind of brilliant, Alaska. By the way, Sean, and I can't believe Raddatz didn't remember this. Alaska used to be Russian. So it's a good reminder that, oh, by the way, we have Alaska now. You sold it to us when the last time you were engaged in conquest, you had to sell off stuff because you were going broke. Just saying. So I think if people actually understand history in the context, the Russians during one of the Tsar's conquest times sold us Alaska because they were broke after, going to war with their neighbors. There's a deja vu there. So the fact that Raditz does not understand history or context tells me everything I need to know about the fact that they were going to say whatever they could bad about the meeting, no matter what. I think it was great that Putin came here, and the security issue was huge. Elmendorf Air Base, I've been up there. Trust me, people aren't going to be hanging out in the woods trying to get into that meeting. So I think it was a good choice, both by symbology and practicality.
Yeah, I agree. You're not going to get the Secret Service to secure some random area in the middle of the world, whether it's the UAE or Dubai, within that time frame. I mean, and then it's someone else's territory. You've got to worry about it. I mean, we were playing a home game at an Air Force base that he could get to relatively easy for a million reasons. I think actually made a ton of sense. And then to Marco Rubio's point, you don't think that, the photo op, it was like it was inevitable.
Yeah. I challenge people to go back and look at some of the other photo ops with Barack Obama and Putin, Biden.
Wait, by the way, Barack Obama told Medvedev, I'll have more flexibility after the. I mean, all of these people forget how they treated him. Hillary Clinton handed Lavrov a reset button from Staples. Right. I get a kick out of the fact, Tony. I'm watching these Sunday shows this weekend, and Jake Sullivan in particular is being brought on, every one of them. There is a bit of irony here. You guys let this happen. This was on your watch, and now you're going to critique Donald Trump about how he's solving the fire that you started?
Yeah. Jake Sullivan has to be... No, look, I want to comment on Jake. Jake Sullivan has to be one of the most infantile members of the political class ever. He may be a good operative for his political masters, but he's an idiot when it comes to this. Remember, Sean, literally a week before the 7 October attacks by Hamas, he said the Middle East was, quote unquote, the quietest it's been in decades. I mean, come on. And then this whole thing with Russia, they miscalculated over and over again by essentially trying to defer and appease Putin instead of standing up to him. And I think, by the way, I'm surprised they didn't talk about this more in the Sunday shows. Putin said if President Trump were in office, this all would not have happened.
I was going to get to that. So do you think, when I heard that, I get it was music to Trump's ears, right? Did you take that as Putin sucking up to Trump, or, hey, sign of respect, bro, I would have never done it?
I think it's the latter. It has to be the latter because, let's face it, Biden even said, well, if they just take a little bit, we're fine with that. Okay, it's like, how do you not act on that? If it's like,
that line doesn't come up, Tony. It's so funny. You just said that. I can't believe that line. I want you to repeat it for the audience, because for all the talk about Trump's allowing them to take land. Biden's the one who told at the jump this was okay.
Yeah, he literally said it. I believe it was December, right before, I think in 21. It's like, if it's okay if they take a little bit of territory, they can take a little. I don't remember the exact phraseology, but it's out there. People can get it. And it's like he said it. And so if you say that and you're considered the leader of the free world, do you think Putin's not going to respond to that? Of course he is. So this goes back to Jake Sullivan, who basically was able to completely bend over backwards, literally, and just continue to do things and say things which encourage the Russian bear to be aggressive.
I'm Googling while you talk, and Biden says that it could be a minor incursion.
A minor incursion.
Minor incursion. I mean, again, it goes back to, okay, so they're all getting upset about Trump, and yet it happened on Biden's watch, who said it was okay for a minor incursion, and you want to go off on Trump? Give me a break. I just got a kick out of the fact that these guys bring on Jake Sullivan as if, who cares what, I mean, he literally is the guy that had it happen on his watch. They didn't do anything for 4 years, and now they want to lecture us. Let me ask you one more thing before we kind of pivot to the way forward. There is a school of thought that I heard over the weekend that said the following. If you allow Russia to have any kind of deal going forward that would acknowledge land taken, you're setting a very bad precedent for Taiwan, because China could now say, well, look, we're going to go take Taiwan because you guys basically said it was okay.
So I understand there's that school of thought, and I don't agree with it. And here's why. First off, the CCP, the communists, pushed the legitimate government of China off the mainland. People have to go back and look at the end of World War II. There was a lot of shenanigans going on as the war ended. We were supporting the Chinese nationalists. Matter of fact, the symbolic, heck, I've still got the symbology on my thing here, the Flying Tigers, Claire Chennault, we went over and supported the Chinese nationals. And it was through a combination of working with Mao, who was actually a revolutionary leader during World War II in that time, to work with the nationalists. After World War II ended, the nationalist government was very weak. The Chinese communists were able to push essentially the legitimate government off the mainland, and it had to go to Taiwan. So I don't consider this something that we should be saying, oh, it's a Chinese land grab. It's like, no, the communist Chinese, in my judgment, remain the illegitimate leader of China, period. And I think that should be our take. It's like, no. The Chinese communists is a remnant of World War II. So we should recognize Taiwan as the legitimate Chinese government. And I think that would go a long way to appease or assuage the idea that somehow China has the right. They don't, the CCP. So that's something different. This is, to me, much more like North and South Korea. North and South Korea, where you had essentially one people who were separated by political differences. That's how I see this. I've said this before, Sean. Ukraine, we should never have been involved in Ukraine because essentially it's a civil war between Russia and Ukraine, who have a long and abiding relationship. So I know there's some parallels with China and Taiwan, but I think this is much more like North and South Korea if you actually look at the actual
But
facts.
we had this 1994 agreement where we basically said to Ukraine, hey, if you give up nuclear weapons, we'll have your back. So to play devil's advocate for a second, to your point about staying out, there are those in the U.S. that would say, well, Tony Shaffer, didn't we agree that if this ever happened because they had given up nuclear weapons, we would make sure that they were supported?
And as my late friend Bud McFarlane once pointed out to me, we also agreed that NATO wouldn't move east in that same agreement. The idea is that a lot of the states which are currently become NATO, Poland, the Lithuania, Latvia, there was a basic agreement that NATO would not move towards Russia. And so both sides did not follow that agreement, is the way I look at it. And again, one of my Reagan mentors, the late Bud McFarlane, pointed it out to me as we were having this very discussion one day.
So one of there's two in my mind, and this is where you feel free to correct me. Yeah. If there's ever going to be a deal, and I'll get into this in a second because I'll be honest, I'll just preview this now. I'm a little skeptical. If there were ever going to be a deal, I think the two elements of it, and maybe there's an economic, but I think the two major ones would be what land do you agree Putin gets, if any, and what security guarantees does Ukraine get? So let's take the land first. Yeah. Do you agree that if there were, let's assume for a second, because I'll argue this in a minute, but let's just assume for a second that there's the contours of a deal. Do you see any deal occurring where Putin doesn't get land that he's invaded since, the 4 years ago?
I don't, Sean, because Biden basically making mistakes. Think about the $250 billion we spent on the war and how it's like, okay, we tried the military option, didn't work. So at this point, because the Russians continue to gain ground, you're not going to gain anything by the Europeans having virtue signals and, we're with Ukraine. It's like, yeah, but you're not really. You're here to put on a nice suit and go in with Zelensky and talk to the president, but you're not really there. So unless the Europeans are willing to actually do something rather than say something, there's no military solution. So if there's no military solution, you got to allow the water to rise to the level. What's that saying, Sean? It's like, let the water kind of go to the level. That's where we're at. And I think there's two frameworks that have been competing. Minsk 3, which is the ceasefire thing and all that, which Putin said no to, or Istanbul Plus, the Istanbul Accords protocol. And those are both, people can Google those. Those are online. So Minsk 3, the Russians don't trust because the Minsk 1 and 2 the ceasefire was violated. They feel, I'm speaking the Russian side. I'm not Russian. I'm just saying what they feel, that the ceasefire was violated and just gave Ukraine time to rearm in Minsk 1 and Minsk 2. So it's like, yeah, we're not going to do that. Istanbul Plus was actually almost signed off on in April of 2022 until the British said, don't sign it. And this would have essentially allowed for kind of a freezing of where the Russian lines were then, which essentially is kind of very close to where they're at now. Believe it or not, you know this, there's been very little progress along the 4 provinces. It's been a bloody yard by yard fight. So we're not talking about a great deal of gain. What's new is Sumy and Kharkiv have been taken because of the incursion the Ukrainians made into Kursk. So when they lost that toehold, the Russians went into Ukraine in that area. So that's where they're talking about giving up land. I hate to sound technical about this, but this is kind of what I do. So basically, they're talking about right now giving up the Kursk, the area, the Sumy, that area. Yeah, you guys get that back because it's Ukrainian speaking. But what the Russians are saying, they want the 4 Russian speaking provinces. So that's where the line is going to be. And I think at one point, the Russians were open to a referendum to allow the people in those 4 provinces to vote. And I still think that may be on the table. I don't know. I haven't been in the rooms. But the idea here, Sean, is that the Russians feel that if the Russian-speaking provinces want to be Russian, they should be permitted to do that. And I think that's what Trump is going to say, because Trump has basically said there's going to be a land exchange. I think this is what he's going to have to go with.
Does that, though, set a bad precedent? Once you've said you invade land, you went into something that wasn't technically yours, those were the boundaries of Ukraine. Are you setting a precedent, which is what I think a lot of the folks in the media are saying? If you agree to this, and just Tony, here's my point. Tell me one other way that we're getting peace that doesn't involve this. But how do you then square the circle that says, going forward, you can tell a country, don't invade another country? Because if you've allowed Russia to be, in their words, rewarded for invading Ukraine, how do you tell anyone in the future not to?
But they've already done it twice. They did it with Georgia and Crimea. I was like, they've been rewarded. It's like, I want, and you know, because you work for, it's like Trump's left with this like fail policy because it's happened twice already. So he's got to fix it. So you're right. I mean, they have been rewarded. There's no doubt. But then how do you now circle the square and say, okay, that's enough. We can't, you got away with it 3 times. You can't do it a 4th. That's the dilemma right there.
All right, so let's talk about the security side. There's a lot of talk about what Europe might do that would be a non-NATO force, but a NATO-looking force where they would get security guarantees. What is a realistic, give me the Tony Shaffer intelligence officer, like reasonable force that that would make sense and maintain a lasting peace?
Well, I think the best, this may sound strange, the best way to do this is to demilitarize Ukraine, I believe. Make Ukraine into Switzerland. Make it into this wonderful place that people can go and trade and be neutral. But don't make it a European satellite, because I think that, again, brings back the root causes.
Is that even on the table, though?
Yeah, it is actually on the table. I think that's a possibility. It's been proposed. Will it be accepted? This is part of what the Russians have said as part of their agreements. Like make it. And the other thing is that the Russians are hyper focused on Ukraine becoming part of NATO. Just take that off the table. We will do nothing but antagonize the Russians and not. And by the way, NATO is not prepared to be the strong military force it has to be to guarantee any security guarantees. Sean, they only recently, within the last 6 months, agreed to finally get to 5%. And I think it's a paper tiger, and the Russians know it. So don't even bluff them. I think we have to go with what would work. What would work, I believe, is an international force, and this may sound strange, that the Chinese and the United States work together to establish some sort of a 911 guarantee for Ukraine. Because the Russians are always going to be paranoid about NATO. It is what it is. So you got to have something else. So I think they'd accept America. I think they'd accept China. And I
Wait,
think
you want
there's
China? Hold on. So the
I'm
Russians.
not saying I want it. I'm saying it's
no,
what's
no, no,
been
no. But
proposed.
if you're Ukraine, why would you? China and Russia are aligned. Why would you ever want Chinese troops in your? I mean,
Well,
wouldn't you be?
Well, the Chinese have pretended to be neutral. Just saying. So I'm just saying this is on the table. I'm not saying I support it. I'm saying China has put itself up to be a guarantor of peace.
Okay, so let me flip this. Can you
Yeah.
see an international peacekeeping force that is primarily made up of European troops?
No, I don't think the
Really?
Europeans want it. No, I don't think a force like that. And by the way, the French have volunteered to do it. The British and Germans are the three primary. I think Melania in Italy may have said they would think about it, but I think she said no. To do that would require some level of real investment in military strength. You have to put people in.
Right.
I just don't think the Europeans want to do it, Sean. They've given no indication they're willing to put up that kind of money. We're not going to pay for it, and I don't think they can afford it.
Okay, so let's just hypothetically say those three, Germany, the European, I mean the UK,
France, Germany, and UK, right?
and all put up troops. If they were to get shot at or killed, technically not a NATO force, therefore Article 5. But would the U.S. feel compelled to respond in any way, or how would that shift if Russia attacked that force?
Yeah. Well, this is my answer, and this I would give any general officer. It depends. It depends on who's in charge in the White House, because Trump would respond one way, which I think would be very severe and quick if we were in a treaty. Someone like Joe Biden, Jake Sullivan, come on. Jake Sullivan was renowned for not being able to make a strong decision. So
yeah,
I think that's part of what NATO's worried about, Sean, is what to expect from different leaders. If at the end of this term of President Trump, by some miracle, we maintain control like President Vance or President Rubio, then a lot of the Trump policies continue. But if it's a President Newsom or President I don't know, Schiff,
not gonna happen. Never, never.
I'm just saying.
Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks.
Yeah.
I am skeptical that Vladimir Putin will ever agree to any deal. There will always be something more. He's never actually going to sign off on anything. Do you share that?
I do not. I'll be honest with you. I think if Putin needs something, we can give him and Trump can give him, and that's markets. One of the notable features, and by the way, this went under the radar. We mentioned the thing. President Trump mentioned business leaders from Russia and Scott Bessent. So that tells me that not only were we talking about military and diplomacy, we were talking about business.
Right.
So the one thing Putin needs, he needs to get back in the G8. He needs to start selling his oil legally. I mean, come on. Right now, India selling Russian gas, the Russians take a powder on it because they have to sell it really low because India puts a big markup on it and sells it off. They need to get back to being part of the world community. Putin wants that. Putin is many things. He's a thug. He's a strong man, but also he's a guy that understands that he has a constituency called oligarchs. The oligarchs want him. They feel that what was happened. They probably feel it was necessary, but it's time to get back to the business of making money. So I do believe, Sean, that they're going to have to come to some agreement that allows Putin to regain access to the world markets. I think that's what Trump knows. I think that's why Trump is trying to work this out.
Yeah, I will say the economic piece, I mentioned this earlier, is the one thing that no one's talking about. And I agree with you.
Yeah,
I mean, I agree with you in that sense. But that's the funny thing is that it's the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk to. And maybe that's why they're not talking about what happened in that meeting, because it was, hey, if you get to peace, you get what's behind door number 3.
Exactly.
And that's it. But so then let me get to the real question. Can you ever trust this guy on any deal that he cuts?
No, they're Russians. There's a great book called The Russians by Frederick Smith. I read it as a kid in high school when I was in Lisbon, and it's about that thick. But it talks about the basic understanding of Russia. And this was reinforced during the Cold War and my Reagan mentors, Bud McFarlane, Ed Meese, have reinforced this. The Russians' attitude, Sean, is what's ours is ours and what's yours is negotiable. That's never changed. You have to understand that's their mentality. So you can never trust a Russian. As President Reagan said, trust but verify. So you can't never take your eyes off the Russians. You can't do it. Just say it. So,
this is going to come out of left field, but Melania Trump wrote this letter that is now public to Putin about her concern for these children. And there are a lot of children, by all counts, well into the tens of thousands of Ukrainian children that have gone missing, abducted, etc. Do you think a letter like that had any impact on the guy? Do you think, he's a stone cold killer, a KGB operative. Does he even care about that? Like, he's obviously taken the kids in the first place. Does a letter like that impact a guy like him?
It doesn't impact him. It impacts his office. And that's what it was meant to be. Does Putin care about kids? Not beyond the illegitimate ones he's had with his mistresses, just saying. But I think he cares in that this impacts on his image, the image of Vladimir Putin as a leader. So I think something like this is very public. It's been covered all over the world. I think Putin does want to play to a certain audience. That is the BRICS audience. The BRICS audience, which is really his extended audience, they don't want to be seen as bad guys. So in this case, I think this will have an impact on putting pressure on him to end the war. That was what it was meant to do. Does he care about it? I don't think so. But again, it was just more about
as an intelligence officer, right? This is like, is that and I know I will never know but this could have been the most sincere thing that Mrs. Trump's done. And I believe it probably was, but there was a decision to release it publicly.
Right.
And I guess the question I would ask you is, as a military officer, if you were presented with this and said, hey, the First Lady's got this letter, she's obviously very moved by what's happened to children around the world, this is a cause that's near and dear to her heart, would you have played it this way?
I'm going to have to be careful here. So often we have really good intelligence on the internals of what's going on within a leadership structure. So based on what we may have known about the internals of what's going on in Russia or within the community, there would be an assessment by people smarter than me. I'm an operative. There's analysts. We just execute things, Sean. But someone is back behind the scenes, a very close friend of mine. I don't know if you ever met him, Navy Captain Pete O'Brien. Pete was a master in working at Fleet Intel. He worked in the Pentagon. He worked at SingPac. A brainiac like him, who's tracking all the pieces, who has access to the most sensitive intelligence, would say yes or no. When someone came to him and said, hey, how would this impact based on X? So the answer is, I think someone like Pete looked at the current internals, something going on within Putin's inner circle, and figured this letter would be a good pressure point to add to a campaign. So I think it was thought through, and I think it was meant to have an impact.
Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.